And I cashed out and took all $9.42 out of the bank, and my brother and I got 2 McGriddles. And that's what we did with the money from that first one. But
I love how specific that is.
Yeah, it was not successful.
In this episode, you'll get to know Kwame Christian, the leader in ethical and friendly negotiation. And you'll hear the story of how overcoming his greatest fear helped him create a thriving consulting and training business. I'm Dave Crenshaw, and this is my Success Project. Welcome, friends, to the Dave Crenshaw Success Project, the show where I'm teaching my children how to be successful through the life stories of others, but you get to come along for the ride. I'm a best-selling author. I speak around the world to Fortune 500 companies, and I've taught millions of people how to be successful through my online courses. But I'm also a father of 3, and because my children are so important to me, I wanted to create something lasting that would help them succeed. In fact, the idea of doing this podcast didn't get me excited until I thought about how I could help them. But don't be fooled, this show is for adults too, because I thought you'd enjoy learning along with my family. In my episodes, especially like this one, I speak to some of the most successful people I've met in my life's journey. Some of them you might have heard of in the news or on social media, but others have flown under the radar, so to speak, but they still have great stories. I try to interview people who have balanced success and happiness in their own unique way. Because as a leadership coach and an expert, I've found that success isn't one size fits all. There are infinite numbers of ways that you and I and my kids can become successful. And I also do my best to get the stories of people who have balanced success in multiple areas of their lives. And today's guest is a perfect example of that. Multifaceted success shines like a diamond because it covers multiple aspects of your life. In fact, I believe there are 6 facets of success. Think about these, where you're at in each of these 6 areas as I bring them up. Relationships, your health, your profession, money, meaning your financial situation, a cause, as in a charitable cause, and fun. You've got to have fun and enjoy life along the way. That's the kind of success I want to help my family and help you find. And that's what this success project is all about. Now, I'm about to introduce my guest. I am so excited for him. He's someone I've gotten to know really well over the last couple of years. He's just so full of energy, so full of wisdom. As I go through this interview, though, I want to ask you to do one thing. And no, it's not like or subscribe this podcast, but I'm not going to complain if you do that. No, I want you to do something for yourself. As you're listening to this podcast, I want you to look for an action. One thing, one action you're going to take as a result of what you hear today. And then that way you'll make this next guest a part of your life forever. My next guest is Kwame Christian. He's a best-selling author. He's a business lawyer and CEO of the American Negotiation Institute. Following the success of his TEDx Dayton talk, which is amazing, you need to check that out, Kwame released his bestseller in 2018, Finding Confidence in Conflict. He's also a regular contributor to Forbes and the host of the #1 negotiation podcast in the world, Negotiate Anything. This podcast is fantastic. It's had over 5 million downloads worldwide. I've personally hired Kwame to consult me and prep for negotiation situations that I've had. But that said, Kwame considers his proudest achievement to be his family. He's married to Dr. Whitney Christian, and they have 2 lovely sons, Kai and Dominic. Kwame, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Oh man, I am so glad, so grateful that you're here with us right now. As I mentioned to you before we were starting, the moment I thought of this idea of the Success Project and trying to help my kids and trying to help others be successful, you were right at the top of the list because, oh my gosh, you've accomplished so much in your career already, and you're still a relatively young guy, and I'm just in awe of what you've accomplished. So thank you for your generosity of being here.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. And yeah, I just try to keep busy and try to keep moving forward. So I guess that's what we're going to talk about today too.
Yeah. And we'll talk about courses on LinkedIn. We'll talk about the TEDx talk. We'll talk about all these things you've accomplished. I always like to start at the beginning whenever I interview someone. And for me, the beginning, when we're talking about your career, is what you thought you would be when you grew up. I'm not talking about, when you were under the age of 10, because pretty much everybody's, the president or an astronaut, right? So I'm talking about your teenage years when you're starting to form ideas about what your career would be. Did you think you were going to be an expert in negotiation?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Yeah, this is fun. And Dave, I appreciate this because I never really get to go this far back, like to the teenage years, like how I've changed. And I think really one of the things that I want people to focus on is that there's never really a clear path. You're kind of always making it up as you go along to a certain extent. And so when I was in school, initially I wanted to be a doctor. My dad was a doctor. And as a Caribbean American kid, foreign parents have high aspirations for their kids. So I wanted to do medicine, but I stumbled across like entrepreneurship in school. And I thought it was really fascinating. I wasn't sure if I would become a businessman, but I always thought it was interesting. Then when I got to school, things started to change. When I got to college, things started to change a little bit. But in my teenage years, that's where I was.
Okay. You say you're Caribbean American. Where specifically in the Caribbean?
Yeah. So my dad's from Dominica and my mom's from Guyana.
Okay. Wonderful. Yeah. That's a rich heritage to pull from. And it sounds like you grew up in a very successful, oriented environment. For sure.
So my dad is a surgeon and my mom has her PhD in nutrition and was a professor. Then my parents, they started their own practice. So my dad started a family practice after doing surgery for a while at the hospital, started his own doctor's office. And then my mom stopped her work as a professor to work as the manager of the office. And they built up a practice in Ohio.
So as I think about your upbringing, it brings to mind that age-old debate of nature versus nurture. And I do believe personally that it's a bit of both, but I'm always curious about what sort of nurturing did your parents provide? Like what were some of the lessons that you still replay in your head that helped set you up for the success that you're having now?
I think the big one is just hard work and learning. We were big on education. We were constantly reading. Parents were constantly pushing us to be better at school. And growing up, we had the privilege of knowing that college was 100% going to happen. It wasn't a question for us. It was just a question of where and what we would study. Just growing up with that type of mentality really made it clear what it took to be successful. And as long as you have that work ethic and that willingness to learn, and I would say also the willingness to put what you learn into action, you're going to be successful in whatever you do.
Yes, and that's something we're going to emphasize in this podcast, by the way, is those who are listening to not just listen, but to do something. Okay, so you get into college. Where did you go for school?
I went to the Ohio State University, and so I'm actually a triple Buckeye. You saw the smile come up. I had to hit you with a "the." Right. So
yes, of course. For those of you who are outside of the U.S. and don't understand, or aren't familiar with American football, whenever they introduce the players and someone says they went to Ohio State, it's not I went to Ohio State. It's I went to the Ohio State University. Right.
That's right.
I saw the picture you posted actually on social media with you wearing the Ohio State shirt on one of your flights.
Yep.
And so you went to a lot of school. I mean, as someone who I would say I barely got my bachelor's degree out of impatience, I look at that and I go, my gosh, that is a man I can see the hard work right there from the beginning. So what were the degrees that you received?
So in undergrad, I studied psychology. And so my major was psychology and I had minors in foundations of law and another minor in Spanish. And then I went to law school, got my law degree and my master's of public policy, both from OSU. And I finished that up still in the 3 years.
And you mentioned at the beginning about how there are so many different possibilities that we can have in our career, right? I like to think of the term infinite opportunity. There are many, many different ways that you can go. Originally, you thought you were going to be a doctor. At what point did it change and you started leaning more toward law and negotiation and psychology.
Oh, we still have a few more twists and turns, Dave. So I got.
All right, let's go for that then.
Yes.
Where did that happen?
So initially it was medicine, and then I said, you know what, I'll go the medicine route at the beginning of school, but psychology was really interesting to me. Ultimately, I wanted to help people. I knew that was my big thing. I want to help people in general. I want to have a purpose that serves society in some capacity. I thought medicine was going to be it. Then I saw my friends absolutely getting destroyed by the organic chemistry classes and math classes and things like that. And so I said, you know what, Dave, I don't want any part of that. And so I said, I'll be a clinical psychologist.
Wait a minute. You were taught that hard work was a good thing, and you're like, I'm out of here. That's too hard.
That was too hard. That was too hard. And let me be honest with you. Like the real thing that scared me, that did it for me the most, I've never said this on a podcast, but it is 100% true. It was not only the fact that I saw these courses destroying my friends, but I was afraid of dead bodies. I was necrophobic, and I knew you had to work on cadavers. I was like, this is too gross. I don't want.
Yeah,
I don't want.
That's
that.
a big obstacle if you're going into medicine.
Yeah. But I will say, my parents are still proud. There is a Dr. Christian. I married her, so there is a doctor. In the family, it's just not me.
Yeah, but you get Esquire. Yes, that's pretty nice.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
So when I was in school, I realized, well, hey, if I help people through psychology, and I was going down this route, if I become a psychologist, I could help only one person at a time, and that limits my ability to help. If I want to help people at scale, I should do something bigger. So that's when I got interested in politics. So I could still keep my my psychology degree, but then I would add something on top of it. So that's what drew me to the dual degree between law and public policy. But as I started to learn more about policy and politics in particular and what it would take, I knew one thing for sure. I did not want to be a politician. So I was in law school and getting my master's, and I'm like, what am I doing here? This is not what I want to do. And then that's when I found negotiation, and that took me on that path.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah. So I grew up with a father who's a radio talk show host. And I learned from that. I don't want anything to do with politics.
Yep. Yes.
So we arrived at that at different pathways.
Definitely. Yeah. And it's not just for me too, because I know for my own mental health and sanity, I don't want to do that. But then also when I think about my family, I have a young family, and I just see how the struggles of political families is just not worth the cost for me.
Yeah, I completely identify with that, the mental health aspect of it as well. Okay, so that's a lot of school, and you said that you were leaning entrepreneurial. So the question that comes to my mind is, you're in school. At what point did you actually say, I'm going to start helping people? Was that prior to graduation, or was it something that you did concurrently with your education?
It was, I realized that I was starting to get that entrepreneurial bug. I think once that's in you, I don't think it ever goes away fully. And I didn't know exactly what it was going to be. But I did know one thing. I was a people pleaser when I was younger. I think you always have that in you to a certain extent, but you learn to keep it in check. So self-advocacy, having difficult conversations, that's something that I really struggled with. And then it wasn't until I got to law school that I discovered negotiation, where I learned it was a skill, not a talent. I could actually get better at it. And so we had these negotiation competitions at school, and my partner and I, we won the negotiation competition at the law school. That allowed us to represent the school at the American Bar Association regional competition in Canada, and we won that event. And then we made it to the semifinals of the national competition in New Orleans. And so I was hooked. And so I was saying to myself, I know that I want to negotiate myself, because every time I do it, there's a point of pride, because I'm overcoming a massive fear that I had before. But even more so than that, I wanted to be able to share this revelation with other people, because I knew there were other people who didn't know how to advocate for themselves and have difficult conversations. So I knew that was something I wanted to do. I didn't know how to do it. And so I figured, after trying to figure out how to incorporate that, and realizing that there wasn't really anything out there for me at the time for me to have this outlet, I decided I had to build it myself. But that was a few years down the road. I didn't know how I was going to get there when I was in school.
There are a couple of things I really like about that part of your story. Is number one, you were overcoming a fear that you had. And because you had to overcome that obstacle, I think that made you more aware and more sensitive to how difficult it is for a lot of people to negotiate.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of the books that are out there, they're written by people who were generally pretty good at this, right? They have some kind of background that makes them good at this. It was natural. They didn't have to overcome that fear. And so I think that's something that draws a lot of people to my content, because it's negotiation for people who don't identify as negotiators. So of course, the people who are like in procurement and sales, we do negotiation trainings with them, with our company for sure. But there's going to be a massive portion of the population who has to first overcome those mental and emotional barriers and then have the conversation. So I have content that addresses that. And so I think that's one of the things that led to the success that I'm having today.
I love doing these interviews because I always discover something that I have in common with who I'm talking to that I was not aware of before. And right here is a big one, because I'm diagnosed as freaking off the charts ADHD. And so for me, getting organized and getting productive was me dealing with something that most experts in productivity don't do well. And that makes my material accessible to other people. And here I'm hearing you say exactly the same thing with negotiation. And I'll just insert my experience with it. What drew me to you when I first was exposed to you through LinkedIn Learning, where I have courses as well. I watched what you were delivering. I thought, my gosh, this guy is taking something that I'm afraid of and I have a hard time with, and he's making it so easy and so relaxed and so approachable. And I think now I understand why, because it came from that place of, this was hard for me, but I figured it out.
Exactly. And I think one of the things that is growing in popularity, and I appreciate seeing it, is like the vulnerable thought leader, where we're saying, hey, listen, I'm not perfect. I still make mistakes to this day. But it's about being willing to kind of grow in public and share that. Because I think if we come off as too perfect, then it doesn't seem real. It's like, well, yeah, it's easy for Kwame to say that. He's Kwame. Nope. Kwame's just like me. We both have those same struggles. So I'll make mistakes. He'll make mistakes, and we'll all get through it together.
That's beautiful. I mentioned there were two things that I liked about your story. The other one was that you were participating in competitions at Ohio State. Those competitions were not mandatory, right? They were not required for your degree. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah.
Okay. And that right there is really valuable, because I think a lot of people, they think there's a path. You go to school, you work hard, you get your grade, you go into your career, and you work hard and you move your way up. But there are so many other side opportunities that are so valuable in your career growth. And I mean, clearly participating in that competition, which was not required, led to where you are today and the confidence you have with it.
Absolutely. And listen, I'm slowly and dramatically stepping onto my soapbox here, Dave, because you hit on a point that
step up.
this really resonates with me, because I think they're like one of the greatest mistakes that our education system makes is that they kind of presuppose that there is a way, like a path. And I think for a lot of people that doesn't really exist, and it can be really frustrating when you don't find your place in society. And so for like you and me, we had to build what we wanted to see. And it's scary. And there's really no blueprint for that. And I think one of the things that's helpful for me, what I found is, they talk about following your passion, which is kind of nebulous advice. I think about it more in terms of following your curiosity. Like, what are those things that you're interested in? So for me, like, it was working on myself. Like, how do I overcome this fear? How do I get better? How do I help people? But learning psychology, I was always fascinated with that. So I'm reading psychology books all the time to this day. Like, one book I'm reading is like an old school book on depression called Feeling Good. But learning that psychology is really helpful because, for example, in the book, it talks about cognitive distortions. It's the things that hold us back, like our voice in our head. And now I think about it as it applies to negotiation. What are those like lies and self-limiting beliefs that people have? Understanding that helps me reverse engineer solutions to help people overcome that. And it helps me to approach negotiation from a really interesting perspective, because it's not just the external negotiation, but also helping people with the internal negotiation. That psychology background helps me to do that. But it wasn't like I said, you know what, I'm going to grow up and be a negotiation expert that also helps people to handle the internal negotiation. No. I'm just interested in psychology. I'm interested in conflict resolution because I recognize how it's changed my life. And then I can blend it in a unique way because I followed my curiosity and I know a lot about both of them, so I can blend it together. And so I think we have to be willing to give ourselves, and especially the young generation, license to be creative and playful with the way that they want to go through their career, and not limiting people and feeling like they need to be forced in a certain direction and commit. Because I was that guy who graduated 3 degrees, passed the bar at age 24, being sworn in at the Ohio Supreme Court, asking myself what I want to be when I grow up. I didn't know, had to make it up. And it's scary, but it can be done.
Well, I heard a story just recently of a location right here where they're trying to have the kids figure out their career by 8th grade. I'm thinking, this is not reasonable, nor is it healthy.
No.
You know, I've told my kids, you can explore right up until your junior year of college, because everything up to that point is generals. You're trying lots of different things. So you've got quite a while. And it sounds, and I think you'd advocate even more, right? Even past that point, because you were getting sworn in and you still weren't quite 100% convinced of it.
Exactly. And I think about it almost like, let's use a metaphor. I'm teasing this out so we can tease this out together here, Dave, because I think about it almost like a video game. But it's more like a choose your own adventure type of thing. And my responsibility is to level up. I don't always know exactly like what the next level is going to be, but I know that acquiring skills and knowledge and putting those into action is going to get me there, right? So it's like, I'm interested in negotiation. I'm interested in psychology. So I'm going to go really far in that. I'm going to get a degree in psychology. I'm going to focus on negotiation. I'm going to take these negotiation courses. I don't exactly know what my career is going to look like, but I know that I want to acquire these skills. And then by acquiring these skills, I put myself in a position where once the opportunity presented itself, I was able to take advantage of it because I had the skills. And so when I let my curiosity kind of guide the development of my overall game, my mental game and all those types of things, then when the opportunity presents itself, I'm ready. But I don't feel obligated or forced to commit to something super long term. I still don't know where my career is going to end up, because we have some really interesting opportunities, potentially like TV shows, things like that. But I just know that continuing to hone my skills, getting better, growing my audience, there's some principles that I need to follow to continue to move up. But I don't ultimately know exactly where it's going to take me.
But you're always working on improving your abilities in everything so that when that opportunity comes, you're prepared for it.
Bingo. Because I know that there's certain things that are always going to be the right answer. Getting smarter, studying, reading, improving my skills, that's always going to be the right answer. For thought leaders like you and me, creating really, really valuable content, being generous, sharing that information and growing our audiences, that's always going to be the right answer. Like there are these things in our lives that are like generally always going to be the right thing to do. Getting stronger, smarter, working harder. Those are always going to serve you. So like stay focused on that and then take advantage of the opportunities when they come.
I love it. Okay, so you received your Juris Doctorate, you passed the bar, you founded the American Negotiation Institute in 2016. Mm-hmm. So was that prior to or just after getting that degree?
So that was after. And this again, I love the premise of this show because I get to show how sloppy this was. Usually I have to show like the really clean picture because I was a tinkerer. Like I knew there was a business element that I wanted to do. And so I love the phrase fail faster. So I had to try different things. So like the American Negotiation Institute is what I settled on. It might not even be where I end. Who knows? I don't know what the opportunities are, but this provides us a great example. While I was in law school, I started an online business called My Tropics, where I recruited people from the Caribbean who were selling Caribbean goods and would connect them with purchasers here in the United States because it's tough to get like Caribbean products.
Wow, that is radically different and very entrepreneurial.
Exactly. Very, very different. So like while I'm getting these 2 degrees and running organizations at the law school, I'm doing this in the back end, trying to build up this tech company. It didn't work out. At the end of the 2 years and a lot of investment, I cashed out and took all $9.42 out of the bank. And my brother and I got 2 McGriddles. And that's what we did with the money from that first one. But
I love how specific that is.
Yeah, it was not successful. But I learned a lot. And so for me, it taught me how to run an online business. And like that information is what I used to make the American Negotiation Institute successful, because there wasn't really another negotiation consultancy that was leveraging podcasting and thought leadership and things like that. It was the information that I got from that failed business endeavor in law school that took me to that place. And then also growing my, I started a law firm. So I practiced building up a client base. And that's where I started to negotiate the most myself, just with my own personal law firm that I created representing clients and things like that. So there were 2 other entrepreneurial endeavors before the American Negotiation Institute. Neither of those 2 would I say are like massive success. I don't think $9.42 is much money, but I learned a lot. And that's what helped me to be so successful with what I'm doing today.
Yeah. I mean, my first attempt at building a coaching business also failed. I also think there's value in, you said fail faster, but I also like fail early.
Yes.
Meaning when you're young, you don't have children, perhaps you're not married, the stakes are much lower. So it's easier to recover from those missteps.
Bingo. And remember, so I want to make sure somebody listening today who might be in their 40s or 50s saying, oh, yeah, I heard Dave, I should fail young. I guess I missed my chance. No, remember this. So you like the stakes are never going to be lower than they are right now. Right. Because the assumption is like you're going to continue to get older, like you're going to continue to accumulate more things, so the stakes will always be getting higher. So now is the time to try to experiment. No matter what age you are the youngest now than that you will be in the future. Right. So you should
that's wonderful now. Because it's because what we see often with people, I was just talking to a guy the other day and he was like, I've always wanted to be a business owner, and he's starting when he's in his mid 50s. And that's great. But I think the sad part of it is he's been wanting to do that for 30 years.
Yeah.
And didn't make the attempt yet. Yes. Again, that's wonderful he's making the attempt now. But I think what you just said is perfect. Now is better than later.
Exactly. And this is something I'm realizing. Now is better than later, and it will never feel comfortable. And I think this is one of the biggest cosmic jokes that I've run into throughout my life. I'd love to get your thought on this too, because when, as an entrepreneur, I have seen a lot of people who have said they wanted to be entrepreneurs. I've seen a lot of people who said it and never did it. And a lot of people who said it and tried it and quit early. And after seeing it with other people and seeing it in my own life, I realized that there's this myth where we assume that when we understand that something would be the right time, it'll feel right. But it never really feels right. I have 2 kids, a 7-year-old and a 1-year-old, and I do a decent job as a father, but it never feels like easy or or comfortable. Same with starting a business. I wonder when it's going to feel like super secure, because I feel, and maybe this is a bit of imposter syndrome that just doesn't go away. It feels like Kwame and his friends pretending to be adults. That's what it feels like to me still, Dave. And I think, and I think that when it comes to leveling up, what you have to do is you have to pick your goals, but then you have to commit to doing them, even though it feels really, really, really uncomfortable. And I think, like, from the outside looking in, I look at other people and I'm like, man, they got it all together. But then I realize that people look at me and think the same thing, but I still feel like a child in a grown-up's body sometimes. We can't follow those feelings because a lot of times they'll just lead us to stay firmly rooted in our comfort zone and not taking the risks that we need to take in order to level up.
Yeah, I feel like, so I'm 47 now. I feel like I just got over that feeling like I'm pretending to be an adult about 2 years ago.
See?
Now I feel like I'm an adult, and maybe having a teenage son helps with that, because I realize, wait a minute, I am quite a bit older than this human being who's in my house. One thing about what you were saying is the importance of not being precious with things. That's part of the reason why I like this project that I've started with the podcast. Is I don't feel like every episode has to be perfect.
Yeah.
All I have to do is give my best effort and go through it, and I'm going to learn something. And each time I'm going to get a little bit better at it. And I think one of the reasons why people hold themselves back, not just with entrepreneurial ventures, but any new project, is they expect it to be perfect. And as long as you're expecting perfection, you're always going to be holding yourself back from making an attempt.
Yes. Listen, this is perfect timing because that was actually just talked about in the book I referenced earlier, Feeling Good. And especially for people who are high achievers, we think that the idea of perfection and being a perfectionist is actually what motivates us. But it's actually something that holds us back because we can perform at a high level and still feel good at the same time. But we are afraid to let go of that because we think that we need to essentially verbally abuse ourselves in our self-talk in order to motivate ourselves. So if it's not perfect, we take it hard and we say, "Oh, Dave, you should have done better. Kwame, you should have done better. You should have known," right? And then we feel bad and we think that feeling bad is what motivates us. No, we could actually accept our failures a little bit more readily if we know that we're not going to then abuse ourselves and criticize ourselves inappropriately. Like that self-compassion, that's the key to self-confidence, but a lot of people don't recognize that too. So we have to let go of that perfection so we could actually take action.
Yes. And I want to ask you a question about this, and this can be for good or for bad.
Yeah.
Is there a moment in the early days of starting, let's focus on the American Negotiation Institute. Is there a moment that you are regularly replaying in your brain and your brain is trying to figure it out or tell something to you by that repetition?
Yeah, there are several moments, and it's really recognizing that there are certain things that I need to overcome in order to be a better leader. I think that people pleaser inside of me is still there.
Is there a story that illustrates that your brain
Yeah.
keeps going back to?
I would say it's like recognizing underperformance in team members, but because I didn't want to hurt people's feelings, not making the tough decision, like firing somebody sooner. Like that is one of those moments I keep going back to because the other business mistakes, I can take those on the chin because I didn't know what I needed to do. Like I genuinely thought I was doing the right thing at the time. Like, oh, let me try to do these trainings and sell tickets in different cities, right? That was just, I tried it. It didn't work out. Okay, I can learn from that. But this one, like there were people on the team that I knew I needed to let go. But I felt bad that people pleaser inside of me kept on coming back and holding me back from making the decision that I needed to make. And so like those are ones that I review more often because I realized like at the time I did know the right answer and I let fear hold me back. There were other times where I just didn't know the right answer, but those two ones I did know the right answer and I let fear hold me back.
I have a whole chapter in my book, The Focused Business, devoted to just that issue of working with entrepreneurs and helping them fire people or let people go, and they just held on to them too long. I mean, I've seen that 100 times
Yep.
in my consulting career. So you're definitely not alone in that being a thing. So you had a few different things that have happened that I think really led to your success. And so first, I'm just going to ask which one of these was the biggest impact. So one was giving the TEDx talk, Finding Confidence in Conflict, that got 400,000 views. You published your book, Finding Confidence in Conflict, in 2018, and you started as a LinkedIn learning instructor in 2020 with currently 16 courses published. So which of those do you think was the first catalyst for you, what I see, just reaching an entirely new height than where you were before?
Actually, it's one that you didn't mention. It was the podcast.
Oh, great.
Yeah, the podcast. That was it.
Oh.
Yeah, that was it. So I try to be a student of the game. Like my goal is to read a book every single week. I try to as much as possible. But I realized after like observing people that I respected in the industry, I knew I wanted to be a respected thought leader. I developed this theory. So my theory was there's a 3-pillar, like thought leadership is like comprised of a 3-legged stool. So first you have to have a method of distribution to an audience that you are completely in control of. And so that was the podcast. So that was year one. That was my focus, 2016, get the podcast done. Next, they have a really big publicized speech that has a high production value. So 2017, that was me, the TED Talk. Then they have a book. And so that was 2018, Finding Confidence in Conflict. So every year, my goal was to knock off one of those things. but it built in credibility. But the foundation is the podcast, because it was the number one negotiation podcast in the world. And so that gave me the credibility to do the TED Talk. The TED Talk gave me the credibility for the book. And then it just kind of, it was like a flywheel from there. But it's the constant production of the podcast and the incremental growth, because that the TED Talk and the book, those are big injections and people still go back to it, but they exist in a crystallized format. They're not changing, but the podcast continues to evolve and continues to grow and become something different like every single week. And so that's the thing that really is the catalyst, because at this point we're at about 450,000 downloads a month.
Wow.
And so it just keeps on growing every single month.
So it's interesting because you said the three-legged stool, method of distribution, publicized speech with high production values, and a book. And I wrote down the fourth, and then you immediately said it, which was the word I wrote was consistency.
Yep.
And you wrote constant production and incremental growth. And if you've got all those things, that's the key, because like we were talking about before, you just get better every time you do it. I go back, Kwame, and I'm sure you have this experience with some of your early podcasts. I go back to my YouTube videos, and I was, doing stuff on there from like 2010, 2011, and I look at it and my whole body just shrivels and cringes looking at the production value and looking at my delivery.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, how did I ever survive that? But that is a pathway to success, is just, even if it stinks in the beginning, you just keep doing it. And then it gets amazing. And I think that experience shows up in your LinkedIn learning courses.
Bingo.
Because you are so confident and so smooth and so accessible on those courses on LinkedIn Learning. And as we're talking about this, that wouldn't have occurred without you starting that podcast back in 2016.
Exactly. I think I've developed this new mentality where I just say everything's practice. No matter what I'm doing, it's practice. Big keynote, that's practice. Everything. Because my assumption is that it's just going to keep on getting bigger and better in the future. My audience is smaller now than it will be in the future. That's always the assumption. So I need to do well now because it's going to get better. And so when people are talking about starting a podcast, I tell them start it as soon as you can, because your first episodes are going to be terrible. And the sooner you get those terrible episodes out of the way, the faster you get better. So now it gives me like the license to fail, because I realize that even my failures, using air quotes, are part of the game. It's practice that I need in order to grow. Like, even though My Tropics is a company that does not exist anymore, it really does not doing anything, I needed that experience to learn some fundamental things about business, and especially an online business. So yeah, like I definitely have that same experience going back and looking at some of my earlier stuff. But it's kind of like a baby. Like, we're not going to make fun of a baby for falling down when the baby starts to walk, because we understand that's what it takes. And I just think of myself as a baby entrepreneur. I'm still growing and learning every day, and it's going to be sloppy. I'm going to make mistakes, but that's just part of the game. I need it to get better. That's what I love about the entrepreneurial mindset. There's always something new that you can learn and accomplish. So again, part of the reason, or one of the many reasons why I brought you on this show, is because everything you talk about, family is so important to you. I know that you care so much about your two sons. So can you talk a little bit about the influence of becoming a husband and becoming a father? What influence has that had in your career and in your day-to-day decision-making? I think the biggest thing is efficiency. So I think about when early on, like when I was in law school, when I was doing some other entrepreneurial things, I could work all day. I would love it. I read this book called The Hypomanic Edge. And they say that a lot of entrepreneurs, some of the great explorers and entrepreneurs of our time, they have like hypomania, where they get so excited about what they're doing, where they just have so much energy. They don't sleep, they don't eat, they're just focused on the business, just constantly focused on that. And I can get into that zone where that's all I care about. And so I remember thinking back fondly to days where I'd be up at 6, work till like 8 p.m. and be like, that was a great day. This was so much fun. Right. But now I can't do that because I have to take care of my family, still want to stay in shape. So I work out every morning. That's good for not just physical health, but also mental health too. Really important for mental health. And so like it's it's forcing me to be a lot more efficient. I don't work on the weekends like at all anymore. And so for me, if Kwame in his natural state, my schedule would be get up 5:30, leave to the gym by 6:30, back home by 8, work from 8 to 8, go to sleep, replicate. That's what I would like to do. But with a family, like that morning, I can control that morning, but then I take Dominic to daycare. I get started at work by 9, which feels incredibly late to me. And then I have to be done by about 4 because that's when Kai gets off the bus. And so it forces me to delegate. It forces me to focus on the things that are the most important. And so if I want to still be successful, not just in business, but like being a father and a husband, I need to be a lot more efficient with my time. And I think that is the biggest benefit when it comes to my mentality.
Well, you know the sign of an intelligent person. It's someone whose opinions agree with yours. And right there, you just almost word for word gave one of the principles of my speeches. I talk about the finish line and clearly defining that line, that point in your day, that point in the week that you do not cross. And you can have that line whether or not you've got kids.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that they created that. And exactly what you said, when you create that line and you say, I'm not going to work past, in your case, 4 p.m., it forces you to be more creative and be more efficient. And all too often, people just allow themselves to work long hours and they think that they're being productive. They think they have a great work ethic, but what they're actually doing is just kind of being sloppy.
Yep.
When they could make lots of little improvements that fine-tune their day and help them accomplish the same thing or better in less time.
Yeah. And let me say this to make sure that people don't think that this is easy for me. Like this is like me accepting this is recent. I'm talking like in the last couple weeks, Dave, to be completely honest, right? Because I had those limitations, but I did not like those limitations. And it was really frustrating because there was a lot of cognitive dissonance that was happening. So cognitive dissonance, a little psych nerd term, it's when your words and actions are not aligned with your beliefs. And so for me, I had a belief where, a CEO, like a good CEO, a good business owner, they work really, 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 really long hours. But then there was that other part of me that wants to be a good father. And a good father is present and things like that. And a good father doesn't feel like he's being distracted from work when he's with his family. And so there were these competing identities within myself just in the last couple of weeks that I realized that I can still be a successful CEO and have that identity, and I can still be a present and loving and attendant father who's there, and loving husband too, and who still spends ample time with his family. And so, like, it was a recent conceptualization where I said, you know what, wouldn't that be even more impressive if I could be really, really, really successful at both? Like efficient enough to be successful at both.
Yes.
And like that was the mindset shift that I needed to have. And it's just literally in the last couple of weeks where I've been okay with it, because I was having that finish line at 4 p.m., but I was kind of resentful about it. And so like that was carrying over a little bit with my family where I wasn't like in it as much, where I would be present, but I wasn't enjoying being present because I was still thinking about work. So I just want to make it super clear. I got here gradually, but I'm very glad that I got here.
Well, I love that you're practicing what you preach, which is you're still learning, and you just shared something that you're learning right in front of us. And I love you for that. That's fantastic. I do want to ask one question because I know that this is something that you lately have really been getting a lot of attention and a lot of work for, and it's a topic everyone wants to learn about, and that is race.
Yeah.
And you have courses on how to have difficult conversations about race. Can you share a little bit about, first of all, where that came from, and then what are the basic things to keep in mind when someone has a situation where race comes up?
Yeah, great questions. So straight out of law school, like I said, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. But one of my mentors ran a program called the Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity. And so I did public policy work for them. And my focus was health equity. And so I traveled the country giving speeches on how to create persuasive arguments in health policy to address some like racial inequities that were coming up in healthcare quite frequently. And I got burnt out. It was emotionally exhausting. Believe it or not, me as a single human being there was not conquering racism. And so I just felt really tired. And so that's when I started my own practice, practicing law, doing business law and mediation. And then subsequently starting the American Negotiation Institute. But I was like done with that work. Didn't want to go back and do it. But then in 2020, there was all that social unrest. After the murder of George Floyd, there was we were at a racial reckoning in America again, and people were really struggling with the work. And my wife, Whitney, she had a difficult conversation with me because I was avoiding it like I was before. And she said, well, Kwame, people always look to you for advice on how to have difficult conversations. How does it look to them if you are actively avoiding this conversation when for the past few years you've been telling them to have difficult conversations? It's a bit hypocritical. And so that's what led me to come back to it. And so for me, my mentality is I want to be where the toughest conversations are. And my thought process is if I can give people a resource that allows them to have difficult conversations about this sensitive topic, they could read this and have the skills to have a difficult conversation about any topic.
And what would be the first mistake that most people make? We're talking about the skill, developing the skill of how to have a difficult conversation. What would be the first mistake that someone might make approaching a conversation like this, and what could they do to correct it?
I say the biggest mistake is not having the conversation, because it's a skills issue that most people have. And that's in general. Most people are not well trained in general on how to have difficult conversations. So it's not surprising that people struggle on how to have difficult conversations about like one of the most sensitive topics in our society at this time, right? They are afraid of offending someone. They're afraid of getting canceled. They're afraid of being ignored or disregarded for whatever it is that they feel or believe. But they just say, you know what, I would be better off not talking about it.
That's a justified fear to some degree.
Oh, it was 100% justified. So it's not, I would say it's not an illegitimate fear. It's a completely legitimate fear. But that fear can still lead us to make the mistake of not having the conversation, because sometimes let's say there's something that comes up. You might think somebody was offended because of something that was said in a meeting or whatever. And you say, maybe should I address this? No, I'm going to let it go. And so then the person who might have been hurt by what was said says, you know what, Dave didn't even, somebody said this offensive thing to me in the meeting. Dave didn't even say anything. I thought Dave was a friend. I guess he doesn't care about me. And so the thing is, sometimes it's nothing, but we have to learn how to have the conversation so we feel comfortable enough at least addressing it. And there are tools, like it's a skills issue that we can address to make the conversation a little bit more palatable, to de-risk it. But if you approach the conversation the right way, it makes it much less likely for that to happen.
And thankfully, there's wonderful resources out there. You have the book, How to Have Difficult Conversations About Race. You also have a course on LinkedIn learning about that too.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I would highly encourage everyone to go through that and take that. So one more question, and then I'm going to go into the wrap-up portion where we talk about how someone can take action. Where do you see things going, Kwame? What's next in the next 5 years?
The big thing for me is scaling, because it's been fun growing the company, but right now we're at a point where I'm on the road like almost every week. And it's fun for me, but it takes a toll on my family to be traveling that much. So scaling through, number one, the development of an online course. So that's going to be exciting. So that's going to be something that we're offering to individuals. The next thing is going to be a learning management system. So the online course is going to be the fundamental content that will start the learning management system. So going to some of our corporate clients and saying, hey, we have a scalable way for you to get content, in high-level content from the American Negotiation Institute, delivered by Kwame, that you can have like access to once you pay a monthly fee. And that's how we're planning on growing, because I cannot travel any more than I already am right now. So that's the plan.
And there we go. Back to the efficiency being pushed forward by the fact that you want to be a good husband and father.
That's a great example.
It's forcing you to make the business better than it was before.
Exactly. This is actually, Dave, I'm glad you brought that up, because if I didn't have a family, I just keep on telling my team, I was like, I don't need to come home. Just I'll be in Chicago, I'll be in New York, I'll be in LA. You just don't book me home. That'll be fine. It wouldn't be a problem for me at all. is essentially the family is accelerating the growth. It's forcing me to be more
Yeah.
efficient. That's a really great example of that.
Yeah, that work ethic actually would hold the business down because great businesses know how to operate without the owner having to be continually involved. So,
Wow.
kind of one of those side benefits, of course, just the wonderful ability to be with people you love and your family, but it's also helping you be more successful in your career.
This is great. And see, again, listeners, I want you to see this. This is organic growth, right? Because essentially what we want to do is not just about knowing the right move to make and making the right decision. It's also about embodying the identity that makes those decisions a little bit more frictionless. Cause like I'll do the right thing, but if I'm kind of resentful about I wish I could do it a different way, then my heart isn't moving in the right direction and it feels heavy. It doesn't feel as good as it could. But now realizing, listen, this, like I'm realizing it more every day. And this conversation is helping me to see it even better. It's like the family is actually an asset. It's forcing me to be better. Or otherwise I just work on that, just rely on that work ethic and muscle my way through things when I don't need to. So this is great. I love this. This is like a therapy session, Dave. I appreciate this.
You know what? I really appreciate the compliment. That's not the first time I've heard that from a guest. And that I really, really appreciate hearing that because it makes me feel like, hey, maybe I'm doing a good job with this thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is great.
All right. So this is the point where I turn the conversation to those who are listening. And I say what I always say, which is it's not about what you just heard. It's not even about what you learned. It's about what you do. What's something you're going to do as a result of the wisdom that Kwame has shared with us today? So what I'm going to do, Kwame, is I'm going to summarize about 3 things. Gosh, you gave us, 10 to 20 nuggets of wisdom, but I'm going to summarize in 3 actionable things that someone can do listening to this. And I'd love you to add 1 or 2 after I'm done with that.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Okay, so the first one is knowing yourself. Kwame, as he was going to school and he started going into things, he mentioned how he didn't want to be working with cadavers and he didn't want to work with politics, and how his curiosity led him to psychology and the work that he's doing now. And I think anyone can take a moment and ask themselves, is what I'm doing right now a fit for who I am? And rather than trying to force yourself into something that you are not, instead say, how can I pursue something that really fits me and how I like to work? The second thing that I highlighted was the concept of leveling up. And you were speaking my language, Kwame, because I'm a video game nerd, and you were probably speaking the language of my kids too. but I love the idea of, even if you don't know what the future holds for you, you can always improve on the fundamentals, the basics, the things that you should be doing every day. And if you improve those, regardless of what comes up, you're going to have opportunities. So maybe you can ask yourself, what's a basic thing that I'm not doing well? Am I having problems with time management? Fixing that is going to help you. Am I having a hard time having conversations with people? Listening to Kwame and his courses is going to help you with that fundamental that will help you whether you're a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer or whatever it is that you want to do. Level up by focusing on the basics. And then the third one is that concept of the boundary that we kept coming back to, that his family was a catalyst for success. And whether or not you're married or you have children, you still have people in your life that are important, and you can still create boundaries even for yourself to enjoy life and have fun. And those boundaries, when you define them, do not prevent your success. They make it more likely because it forces you to become more productive and make better choices with how you're spending your day. So that's what I took away from it. Kwame, is there anything you would suggest that's one possible thing that someone listening could do?
I think the biggest thing is taking action. That's the big thing. And just recognizing that everything's practice and it doesn't need to be perfect in order for you to take action. And by just having that practice mentality helps you to put everything in perspective, because something that seems really, really big and scary, when you just say, oh, it's not that big of a deal, it's just practice. It's practice for the next big opportunity. Then it makes it easier for you to take action. So I think that's really the last thing. It's important to learn, but it's also important to take action.
Everything's practice. I think people listening to this podcast are going to get tired of hearing me share my favorite quote, but boy, is it so appropriate. I've got it hanging on my wall. Bob Ross said, every time you devote time to practice, you haven't lost. You're always a winner.
Oh, love that. Oh, I love that. That's great.
Kwame, obviously, we want to also encourage people to subscribe to the Negotiate Anything podcast. What's another place that you would like people to go to stay connected with you and learn from your wisdom?
Yeah, so eventually we'll have that YouTube page going up, 2023, that'll be up and running. But LinkedIn, I'm always posting things of variable quality. On LinkedIn. That's my goal every single day, posting something new. So catch me on LinkedIn. The goal is to help as many people as we can. LinkedIn is one of the best ways for us to connect, and you can get access to our info there.
Yes, I always love your posts on LinkedIn. Always insightful, often heartwarming as you share things with your family. It's fantastic. Kwame, wow, I'm so glad that you agreed to come on the show. Thank you for sharing all of these great insights with us.
It's my pleasure. This was a lot of fun.
You've been listening to the Dave Crenshaw Success Project, hosted by my dad, Dave Crenshaw, and produced by Invaluable Incorporated. Sound editing was done by my brother, Stratton Crenshaw. Research and assistant production by Victoria Bedez. Voiceover by me, Darcy Crenshaw. Show consulting by Andrew Marino. And the music is by Ryan Brady via Pond 5 licensing. Please subscribe to the Dave Crenshaw Success Project on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to get your podcasts. And please don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. See you next time.